Judges 6, verse 12 says, "When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.'"
Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your relationships, your parenting, or just your everyday mess, this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. Today on the show, we welcome back Dan Gilder, and as you may have guessed from the verse we read in the intro, we're going to be talking about Gideon, because coming up here at Grace Church, we are going to be having a men's retreat. On our previous episode, Caitlin Pizarski stopped in to talk about the women's retreat and what they're going to be going over. So as to make sure all bases are covered, Dan is here on behalf of the men's retreat tonight, and he's going to be diving into the story of Gideon and what we can learn from him about being made into a hero, because Gideon does not, if I'm not mistaken, Dan, he does not start off on the most heroic of notes. Is that right?
Right. If you're looking at what a hero would look like or act like at the beginning of the story, he certainly does not embody those traits.
Yeah. So let's dive right in with Gideon. Give us a little context for his story, where he starts, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So Gideon is really, you don't know anything about him until in Judges 6, it tells this story. But the condition of Israel, God's people at the time, was they were in a state of rebellion. And because of their rebellion, God had given them over to enemies around them. The Midianites were the strongest force. And if you've ever watched the Pixar movie A Bug's Life, that's kind of what's happening. The Midianites had so taken over Israel at first that Israel escaped to the caves, and they had temporary dwellings everywhere. But then every year at harvest time, they would show up and take everything that Israel had produced and take it for themselves. So like the big grasshoppers would come.
Oh my gosh.
Take it off their hands. And so I never thought about that until I dived into the story. But it said at the very end of that Israel, now I added this, got so desperate finally that they reached out to the Lord. So the Lord sent an angel to tell Israel, and sent a prophet first to tell Israel exactly why they were in the shape they were in. And then he sent an angel. Now, some believe this angel was actually the pre-incarnate Jesus, the second person of the Trinity that showed up, because it said the Lord spoke to him. Yeah. And he just shows up to a guy you don't know much about except Gideon. You don't know how old he is. You know, he ended up ruling for 40 years and he died when he was old. So he's probably middle-aged. Okay. But this angel shows up, and those are the words that were read earlier that he leads with. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. So Gideon is, we find out a little bit later, Gideon has not been raised to follow God. In fact, later on, Gideon's dad, we find out that his dad had put up in places of worship opposing altars to opposing gods. And so, this angel shows up and says to Gideon, "Hey, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And he's like, all right, let's be real. I mean, he's very respectful to the angel. And then he says, I'm the smallest, my clan is the weakest. And the angel says, "Go with the strength that you have." And he says, wait, why is God showing up now? Look at all this bad stuff that's happened to us. We've heard about what God has done in the past, but why haven't you done this? But God just asks him to go on his behalf. So what do we know about Gideon to start? He had heard the stories. Yeah. But nothing had been modeled to him. Most believe that Gideon was probably at least one generation, maybe two, removed from faithfulness to God. Okay. And yet what Gideon may have seen in himself is not what God saw for Gideon. He saw in him the potential for a mighty warrior. So I just think for most guys, because we're talking about the men's retreat, this will be the first talk. It's called The Making of a Hero. Many of us doubt what God can do through our life because of some of the same issues Gideon had. That I haven't been raised in this. There's certainly better people. my family doesn't have a reputation, or I got doubts about you, God. I wonder where you've been in my life. Why haven't you shown up the way I think you should have? And there's people around me that are hurting. Where are you? And yet that's the beginning point for Gideon's story into becoming, for at least a moment and then for 40 years, a real hero of Israel's story.
Oh, wow. I like that. So what happens next with Gideon? How does God grow this man who comes right out and says, I am the smallest from the weakest clan?
Yeah. Here's what I want to tell everyone. When God invites you to obey him, it's not about you. It's really about the one who called you into it. And so we're going to talk about Gideon, but I don't want to lose the focus on just how big and good, and in this story, gracious God is. Because Gideon started with doubt, disbelief. God's like, okay, you're going to rescue the people from the hand of Midian. You're going to save them. And Gideon's like, I need you to prove yourself first. And so Gideon becomes famous for putting out a couple tests to see if this really was God. And so first, this angel devoured this offering with just a touch of the angel's staff. It burned up what Gideon had brought him. He's like, oh my goodness, this is God. And then when it got a little closer to the time of the battle, Gideon's like, okay, I need you to prove yourself again. And so he's like, here's a test, God. If I can wake up in the morning and this one area be dry and the rest of the ground be wet, then I'll know it's you. And God did it. He showed up again. I see this grace gently easing Gideon into trusting him. And Gideon's like, okay, one more time. Yeah. This time, let the ground be dry, but just this one fleece be wet. And God did it again. And Gideon knew that God was calling him into this. So then the next test came on how would this happen? How would this miracle happen that he would save Israel from the Midian? And they started with 32,000 people. Gideon called them together. And it says something interesting in the text that he did not want Israel to be able to take the credit in their own strength. And so he immediately told Gideon, anyone who's scared to go, let him go home. So of the 32,000, only 10,000 remained. And God said, that's still too many. So he had this little test on how many would drink from this, they would drink with their hands cupped, and some would drink like dogs. And there were 300 that drank a particular way from the brook. And God's like, those are my 300. Those are that's all you need to go into this battle. So, what do I see in there? I see God not chastising this soon-to-be leader for his young faith, his doubts in himself. And God is proving that God can be trusted and that God is strong enough. And he just kept easing Gideon into this. And then, though, Gideon had a choice. And right after God had finally revealed himself, Gideon worshiped. And then he went and did what God told him to do. So I'll probably share at the retreat that sometimes I think we miss out on God's instructions for our lives because we failed to give him our worship. Like the specific instructions on what he's supposed to do happened after Gideon had built an altar to worship God. And this is the hard part. Again, I'm probably going into too much detail, but Gideon was asked to tear down his father's idols.
Yeah.
And this is, again, God's just so gracious. And Gideon did it, but he did it at night because he was afraid of his dad and he was afraid of the community around him. But God, again, didn't chastise him. He did it. And I just see him slowly easing this guy into more and more trust in who God is. But again, take it back to our world. I think a lot of us struggle with doing what God asks us to do because we're afraid to do things our families won't like. We're scared of what other people may say. Now, guys, we don't say that stuff out loud.
Right.
But some of us have daddy issues. Right. And we've used that to keep us from what God may want to do. Like, hey, I haven't been raised in the faith, so I can't raise anyone else up to know Jesus. Or My dad introduced me to things that I wish weren't a part of my life now. Now, I grew in my addiction to sports because of my dad, and I'm just always going to be like it. No, to do what God had asked Gideon to do, he had to destroy false idols.
Yeah.
But again, God can be trusted. Gideon wasn't killed by his dad or the townspeople. God took care of him because God had something in store for him. So I hope our guys hear that. I hope I hear that if I trust God and obey him because of that trust, God actually will take care of all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that you said it's that I never noticed that in this story, that God eased Gideon into this. He did meet him with a lot of grace in responding to each of Gideon's little tests.
Yeah.
To continue to encourage him forward on the path, which is something that I think I definitely relate to or long for, is just like this. I think sometimes we think it's a sudden all or nothing, everything's going to change all at once, but no, sometimes there is like baby steps.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, you do one thing at a time. This is, the theme of the men's retreat is the making of a hero. Mm-hmm. And we think of hero with superhero stories and big acts. But I hope we redefine that I really think a hero is someone who is humble, obedient, and faithful. That's it.
Yeah.
Because any result is really up to God. Humble, obedient, and faithful. That you don't go into it prideful, trying to get something for yourself. Obedient, you do what God asks you to do. And faithful, meaning from a place of faith. You are going to have to do things that display that you trust that God will show up when you can't see God acting. Gideon had to choose to trust. At the end, the battle plan was he gave him a trumpet and he gave him a pot and he gave him a torch. Yeah. And they went out and blew the trumpet and broke open the jar and put the torch in it. And God had already made the enemies fearful and they left. They started fighting themselves. Like, that's preposterous.
Yeah. The plan was just to scare the crud out of the enemy.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Right. Yeah. That's it. And trust God that God is going to somehow work that out, that these.
Yeah. You would think it would be surprise attack, but no, It was just surprise.
Surprise.
And then they tore themselves to pieces.
So to do something that God asks us to do, it'll always require us to place our faith in him, demonstrated through our humble obedience. So again, to be a hero doesn't mean that we have to go save the world or save people on the other side of the world. It might simply be, I want you to start discipling your children.
Yeah.
I want you to be faithful to your spouse, right? Just simple, humble faithfulness. I want you to pray for your leaders. If that's what God asks you to do, you're being a hero. You're doing exactly what the creator of the universe, who's holding it all together, is asking you to do to bring heaven to earth. Yeah. You do that, you are a hero. In fact, Hebrews chapter 11, it's the hall of faith. And at the end, it says, Gideon, he's named in the hall of faith, this reluctant, fearful, skeptical. And honestly, his story doesn't end as well as you'd like, but he's mentioned in that story as someone, not that he did all these great things, but his faith was so outstanding that God used him abundantly.
Yeah.
I hope all of us realize that when we exercise faith in God, God does the impossible things.
And it is being, as Jesus said, being faithful with little.
Yeah.
And maybe it leads to much.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The goal is not much. The goal is to be faithful.
To be faithful.
The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, right? Be faithful in the small things, and then they will grow and develop.
Just a little bit of yeast.
Yep.
Yeah.
In dough. Changes the whole texture of the mixture.
Right.
Love it. So with the men's retreat coming up, if guys listening want to come and be a part of it, if they're in the Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan, anywhere within driving distance to Perrysburg, if they want to come, how do they get involved with our men's retreat, Mr. Dan?
Yeah, first, it's a Perrysburg area men's retreat. I think last year we had about 12 different churches participate. The 3 main speakers are from 3 different churches. Our breakout sessions come from people all over the greater Toledo area. But you can find out information on all of it by going to gracegmc.net. And right there at the top of the website, you'll see one of the little headers, pictures. It'll say Men's Retreat. You click on that. It'll have the information on time, the list of the speakers, the breakout sessions, the cost, childcare, registration, all that stuff. It's $20. It's for Friday night from 6:30 to 9 or 6:30 to 8. And then on Saturday from 9 till 3. So we'd love to see you there, February 27th and 28th at Grace Church, Perrysburg.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, we will, obviously you and I will be there.
Yep, I have to be there, but I can't wait to be there.
Looking forward to going into more detail with Gideon, but also other characters of the Bible. I know we're going to talk about Abraham and even do a little bit of superhero paralleling and kind of looking at our favorite comic book heroes and what we can learn from them for our lives. So, well, thank you, Dan, so much for joining us and
always
sharing
my pleasure.
Your insight. Thank you all for listening. We are going to wrap up our episode for today here, and I hope that you can take some of this into your walk with the Lord and into your lives this week and this year. If you would like to be notified of our next episode, which we'll post 2 weeks from now, then we recommend liking or subscribing to this show on the podcast app of your choice. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.